Managers of Reddit, what made you fire an employee on their first day? Well, second day for this one. Old guy kept dozing off during training, denied it when I addressed him about it, and yet it kept happening. Fired him for it on day 2. Fast forward maybe 8 months. He emails me to let me know that he really had been falling asleep and I had been justified with the action I took. He realized there was an issue a few weeks after I terminated him because he fell asleep while driving and rear-ended another vehicle. Went to a specialist as a result, and they found that the Parkinson's medication he'd started shortly before beginning training was making him narcoleptic. Said he had rectified that with new meds and asked for a second chance. Gave him the opportunity for a do-over, and lo and behold, he's a good employee. Story 2. Pub and bar manager here. This happened at my previous pub. New guy's first shift and he was constantly on his phone and going for cigarette breaks without permission. 2 hours into his shift, his mates came in and he gave them all free drinks, shots, and snacks. A few of them were under 18. Fired him on the spot, and he had the audacity to appeal, despite overwhelming evidence against him, including 5 witness statements and CCTV, not to mention the stock count deficit. Story 3. Girl snorted in disgust when I asked her to clear a table in her section. Wouldn't be shown how to set a table, and snapped at another manager. "Do you even want to be here?" I asked. "Not really." "Okay, grab your stuff. Good luck to you." Story 4. The dude who showed up in pants so tight you could see his entire junk and balls. It was a children's bounce play fun zone. We told him to go home and change. He came back over an hour later with Starbucks in blindingly white skinny jeans. Same issue. Parents complained the first time. Story 5. Chief officer of a merchant vessel here. Technically, second in command of the ship after the captain. A seaman joined our ship while our vessel was berthed in Mobile, Alabama. He was carrying a plastic water bottle during familiarization rounds on deck with the third officer, and when it was empty, proceeded to throw the bottle overboard. My Russian captain saw this, calmly asked me to call the seaman to his office, gave back all his documents, asked the agent to book him a flight back to where he came from. All of this happened in a span of 3 hours. Story 6. Guy lied about knowing how to drive forklift. Drove into support beam. To Europeans, there's no such thing as a forklift license in the US. When you go to a new job, you have to redo the exam again. There's also no official exam, so every place does it their own way. Story 7. I had an employee call off on her first scheduled day. On her second scheduled day, she showed up 2 hours late. This was a sub shop. We weren't open yet, but we had been in doing prep, baking bread, and building our sub trays for catering orders. We told her that this wasn't going to work out, and she got pissed. She started yelling that we were all racists a-holes. And as she stormed out the door, she knocked over stacks of sub trays. We lost 15 trays to her tantrum. My boss went running out the door after her, and the girl's boyfriend got out of the car and reached behind his back, swearing and telling my female, a boss, that if she keeps stepping to them, that he would stop her good. We were pretty sure that he had a gun. My boss checked the license plate and came back in. We had all of this girl's information, address, phone, social security, etc., from the paperwork. So with that and the security footage of her destroying the trays, we were able to press charges for the damage. Story 8. I was assistant manager at Subway. I usually like to give people time. It's a tougher job than it seems from the outside. Everyone sucks at first. And taking someone's livelihood away is not a decision to be made lightly. But I had one lady who only lasted 3 hours. She was perfectly fine for the first couple minutes while the store manager was there. But she had a doctor's appointment, so she introduced us and told the new employee. I was in charge when she wasn't there. As soon as my boss left, this lady just flatly ignored me when I asked her to do stuff like food prep or dishes. So I was already pretty pissed, but trying to be patient. When we got busy, I stationed her putting veggies on sandwiches. She said a few things to customers that annoyed me, but nothing too bad at first. Then one guy asked for extra olives and she told him no. He was a bit offended and asked again, and she practically shouts, "You don't need any more olives, you have plenty." So I tell her to give him the olives he's asking for. Then she starts shouting at me about Subway standard veggie portions, like I wasn't the one who taught her 45 minutes ago. I tried a little to explain that it's a default amount, but customers can get extra, no big deal. She wasn't having it, so I stepped away from my station, gave the poor guy his olives, and apologized. That's when she lost it and started screaming that I was undermining her. I told her to go do dishes and I'd cover her station. She went storming off. I was already planning on talking to the store manager about it because crap, but as luck would have it, the franchise owner dropped in for something or other. As soon as New Girl realized who he was, she started ranting about how I didn't control my veggie portions or some crap and I should be fired. When the franchise owner took my side, obviously, she shouted at him too. That was that, except that she called the store manager later, in tears, begging to know what she'd done wrong, and made it sound like she didn't realize I was her boss, or that shouting at the owner about how he doesn't know how to run a business is inappropriate. Story 9. My boss hired a new lab technician. I am the manager, so he had to report to me. At the end of the shift, he tried to clean medical equipment with dish soap because he didn't want to wait for the machine to finish, which the other crew would be responsible for. He tried to microwave red liquid in a microwave for food. And last but not least, he forgot to put someone in the freezer for 5 hours. He was such a mess. Story 10. The guy signed a non-disclosure as we were working around movie sets and production offices. Throughout the day, he continuously asked if he could take photographs. Finally, I realized that his employment was not worth risking my own employment or the production company's information. He was relocated elsewhere, but he did not last long from what I hear. Story 11. Hired a guy on the recommendation of another employee. He no-call, no-showed the first day. Second day, he no-call, no-showed, but halfway through the day called to tell me that his kid was sick, which I'm sympathetic for because I have kids too, but I had to tell him we couldn't use him. Then waves of abusive texts and phone messages from him and his wife. His final text was super long and explained how I'd just made it an enemy for life, and that he was going to get even by starting up a rival business and putting me out of business. If only he'd put that much energy into showing up. Story 12. Two stand out. He was laughing at the ice bin. Admitted he was tripping balls. We laughed. I said, "You can't work here like that." We laughed. He said, "Yeah, I know." So that was fun. She stuffed all the fives from a fresh register, meaning I knew exactly how many fives were supposed to be there, in her bra, assuming everyone who was totally watching wasn't paying attention. Nobody was going to shake her down, and the police were busy. She made $75 for roughly 30 mins of training. Story 13. It's what happened on the first day, but he didn't get fired until a bit later when we figured it out. Managed a MSP team, hired a bright guy. All seems good on the first day. At the end of the first day, he received a phone call where he announced his father has passed away. 2 weeks of compassionate leave for funeral out of state later, he was supposed to start work again, but called from the car park to say he's too distraught. This goes on for 3 more weeks until one day, we got a phone call from someone looking for this worker. It was his father. As it turned out, he's been running this scam where he gets jobs with multiple companies and pulls this same stunt getting paid during the probationary period regardless of what happened for as long as he can. He set up salary payment to multiple accounts himself and to friends to avoid detection from tax agency. This guy was smooth, lied and cried, conned the lot of us. Not sure what happened to him, but we reported this to the tax agency for a case of tax fraud. Story 14. I'm not the manager in the story, but I was there for part of it. Dude gets hired, starts training. During training, GM instructs him to take out the trash. He refuses, gets into an argument. Apparently, he didn't know that he was arguing with the general manager despite the big fancy name tag with General Manager asterisk printed in block letters on it. Gets sent home. For some reason, he still comes in the next day smelling of alcohol. He grabs food. This is a restaurant without paying right in front of everyone, including a manager. He then proceeds to start coming at a server because they couldn't tell him where the takeout silverware was. Not the server's job. This evolves into a literal fight, and the police get called. We never saw him again after that. This was all before his first actual day of work. Story 15. I'm a bar and restaurant manger. One day, the new kitchen porter walked through the front entrance, carrying a huge bag of cheese over his shoulder, which the head chef had told him to pick up. He walked through the restaurant and, right in front of customers, launched it through the hatch in the kitchen, flying through the air as everyone just watched open-mouthed. The huge bag of cheese landed hard in the deep, fat fryer. The chef working near it got scalded in hot oil and had to go to emergency department. He's the only person I've sacked on their first day. I'm mostly pretty chill, but he was just a walking health and safety nightmare. Even after everything that happened, he still couldn't accept responsibility or apologize to the chef he hurt. He's the only person I've let go without a hint of remorse or sadness. The safety of your team always comes first. Story 16. He interviewed really well. Seemed excited to be a part of, kept mentioning his mom in a what a nice boy way. He even brought his mom in after we hired him. She seemed really nice too. It's not so weird when you consider how small town is. His first day, he showed up like a damn space cadet. Seemed to barely understand English. Wasn't making eye contact with anyone but staring off into the distance like crazy. Asking if he could take an early lunch 45 minutes into his shift. Dude was high off his gourd, and we politely told him it wasn't going to work out 2 hours into the day. Story 17. I think she kind of fired herself. She didn't show up at all in an actual work capacity. Her first non-training shift was opening on a Saturday. This place opened at 5:30 a.m. So me, excited to sleep in because I opened Monday, which was waking up at 3 a.m. to make it, got woken up at 5:30 on the dot because obviously clients called immediately. Whatever, maybe something happened. It sucked for me and the people trying to get in early morning workouts, but I made it there and had it covered. The problem was when I tried to talk to her about it. She didn't even let me get started. She immediately started yelling at me that I didn't give her enough space for her personal issues or something like that. And then she emailed the vice president of the company about how awful I was. I wouldn't have fired her for that. I tried to talk to her about it to find out why it happened, but I had no chance at all. She just went all out scorched earth. All she got was being fired from a person above me. Story 18. Not a manager, but an employee. I caught my manager pleasure himself in the office, and he immediately fired me and personally shooed me off the office grounds. Gutted, since it was quite a high-paying job, and let's just say, I cannot recover from that incident. Why I didn't report it for unlawful termination. Basically, I was gullible last time, not knowing how to counter this situation, so I was like, damn it. But I don't regret it. At least I have a better job now. Story 19. So I was managing a low-end casual chain restaurant and had hired this kid, probably 17, 18, the prior week. Let's call him Tony. I'd done orientation with him his first day, and then I had a week off for vacation. On my first day back to work, Tony is an hour late. We are super busy, so I just tell him to get to work cooking, and I will address it later. He looks very lost and confused, even though he had 5 training days with my lead trainer. He pulls me aside and says he will be right back and needs to go to the restroom. I'm a bit frustrated with him already and confused why he's asking, but I say it's fine, obviously. Then it happens. My lead trainer comes to me and tells me that this kid is not Tony. I reply with, "What do you mean?" She says, "I was training Tony for 5 days. That is not him." I honestly thought he was another new hire. Now, I had only met the kid once for an hour, right before vacation, so I honestly didn't remember what he looked like. I bolt to the bathroom to confront him once he comes out to find the bathroom empty with a folded-up shirt and hat on the booth outside. The next day, I call Tony to ask what the heck. He ignores the first call and then blocks my next call, so I try from my cell phone and he answers. I say my name, and he immediately hangs up and blocks me too. So my staff and I were left to assume that Tony apparently sent his friend in to work his job in full uniform, and nobody but my lead trainer caught it. I dictate if I should be embarrassed or impressed that his friend has some major balls to go undercover like that. Story 20. Got through training, month long, and the guy had his first day on the floor. He was supposed to be setting up his computer how he liked it. I walked by because he looked like he was struggling. I helped him out and walked him through one of the programs and let him know it was okay to flag me down if he needed help. I proceed to help out 3 others, then circle back to him. No progress made. This was 20 minutes later. I walk him through some other setup. This is all from written instruction from a manual. I go and help a few more people. Come back to see yet again no progress. I ask him what kind of issue he is having with the instructions. Find out he can't read English. All of our instructions and guides are only in writing, in English. It's a requirement on the job interview. I guess someone walked him through that too. Story 21. He couldn't tie an apron on. He couldn't count change. Asked him to unpack boxes and found him sitting on the floor just staring at them. It wasn't so much firing as a mutual, this isn't going to work after 4 hours. Story 22. Not a manager, but was training a new guy on a plastic bag cutting machine. The kind of bags used for products like fiberglass, peat moss, or salt. These machines sometimes have plastic buildup around the sealers. And when this happens, the machine needs to be stopped and cleaned. Usually this only takes minutes. Power off, engage kill switch, remove excess plastic, change Teflon strip if necessary, disengage kill switch, then power back on. This was explained multiple times. Twice on the first night, he disengaged the kill switch and started the machine while I was working on it. Could have had my fingers crushed, or had it clamp on the tools I was using and send shattered pieces everywhere. Lucky for me, the machine starts to vibrate a second before it actually starts, and I was able to pull away quickly enough both times. I stopped the machine, grabbed my manager, and my union rep, explained what happened, and he was gone in 5 minutes. Damn him. Story 23. I was an internal consultant for a regional healthcare provider. I was integrating a smaller and newly acquired healthcare provider that was mostly residential homes for elderly individuals with moderate mental health issues. Technically, I was also the interim director of this new division during the transition period. Once they were fully integrated, I would step away and return to my consultant role. And during the transition period, I was everyone's boss. I was at one of the sites reading charts and coordinating with the site's program manager about transitioning patient records to our system when I physically witnessed the program manager berate a patient for requesting something completely reasonable. It was something about requesting transport, but the exact details escaped me. Berating them would have been verboten regardless, but the request was simple, reasonable, and easily granted. In our system, this would have been a simple yes, without any fuss. But even if it were a no, it should have been delivered in a respectful way with an appropriate explanation. And then she immediately got on the phone and complained about the patient to a coworker while making fun of them. In front of me. I was sitting across the table from her. I looked at my assistant because I thought I was going crazy, and her eyebrows were so high up on her forehead they merged with her hair. I fired her on the spot. To clarify, it wasn't the program manager's first day on the job. It was her first day as an employee of my organization. Story 24. I was a school administrator for a school. Had a new substitute teacher for a middle school class. She was an older lady, very old school elegant. I'm in the hall, and suddenly a class full of sixth graders are running out of the classroom. I go busting in there expecting a brawl or a gun or something. Instead, the substitute is standing at the front of the room in a pool of poo. She apologized and said her stomach was bothering her. She walked out of the room and down the hall, leaving puddles of poo behind her. I call the custodian, and we start with the kitty litter. Thinking my day could only get better, I was shocked when a couple of hours later, a student came running down the hall to get me. I follow them to a classroom, and there's the sub again, standing in her own poo. Again, the admin assistant had told her earlier that of course she could come back after she got cleaned up. I gently asked her to leave and told her we wouldn't be needing her again. So, the custodian and I cleaned everything up again. When I got home, my wife asked me how my day was and didn't understand when I lost it after telling her it had been a crafty day. Story 25. Obligatory, not a manager, but I was training temps for our help desk. I'd done this a few times, and help desk manager told me to let him know if there were issues with any of the temps. While there were a few people I knew weren't going to be very good, there was never enough to get rid of them. Until one day I get a group, and one lady is just kind of glazed over while I'm going through stuff. Everyone had their logins and was following along to get a bit of experience, seeing what to do, and then having the opportunity to do it themselves. After my demo is over, I have everyone come up and show me that they can do what I just went over. There's the normal nervousness of being put on the spot, people blanking for a second before I prompt them on what to do, fat fingering the keyboard, etc. All normal stuff until I get to the quiet lady. She comes up and sits down, and I wait for her to log in, and I wait. And wait, she's locked out her account. Were you able to log in at all to follow along? No. Well, that's annoying because seeing and doing at the same time really helps people grasp the concepts of what they need to do. But whatever. I unlock her account and have her log in. She relocks her account. The new accounts had temp passwords that were all the same, like change, this 01. Thought maybe she got a randomized one by mistake and reset it to the standard to be sure. She locks it again. The other two people in their training class are getting uncomfortable, and I'm running out of ease. The tension jokes. Reset the password again and really watch her. She's using hunt and peck to enter the password, so it's easy to see she's misspelling change every time she enters her password. This time, I reset the password to password 1, and she's finally able to log in and change her password. It's the only time I recommended they get rid of a temp. Nice lady, but there's no way she would have been able to handle doctors yelling at her for the system being down if she couldn't handle entering her own password or speaking up when she had an issue. Story 26. Semi-NSFW. Not first day, but first day without a trainer accompanying them. He managed crash a patrol car. That alone wouldn't necessarily have gotten them fired. The fact that it was into a school bus might not have done it if there were extenuating circumstances, since damage really was minor and no injuries sustained by anyone on the bus. The fact his girlfriend was in the squad care might not have done it if he had bothered to get permission. However, since there was no permission, we moved from might, not to probably so. The fact that both the interior and exterior dash cam managed to accidentally get turned off, almost impossible to do by accident, but his body cam managed to, most likely, accidentally getting turned on though, guaranteed it. The only footage taken from that cam that night was of the top of his girlfriend's head rapidly and repeatedly entering and exiting the camera's field of vision so close that you could see details that usually you'd never be able to see on a person's scalp, right up until impact caused the lens to shatter against her hair tie. The pictures some of the kids on the bus managed to get were just the icing on the cake at that point. Needless to say, at that point, I called my boss and got permission from my boss to end both a shift and a career that night. Became kind of an unofficial training point after that. No celebratory Bravo Juliets in the squad car. Story 27. So technically not their first day, but this was the last day of their temp trial period, and then the next day, they were going to be made full-time. He was a forklift driver, and we keep materials stacked high on very tall racks. Operators are told never ever to drive with the forklift raised up. You remain stationary, lift up, get the pallet, bring it all the way down, then drive. Driver decides to drive the forklift while raised, clips the water sprinkler. Tears the piping from the ceiling, causes the water system to go off, and half our warehouse flooded. We make labels in our shop, and paper, and water don't go well together. He ended up destroying over $40,000 worth of finished product. That's product we already spent money and time making. Story 28. I witnessed someone get rejects before the interview even started. I was in the waiting area of a car dealership service center waiting for my car. The waiting area was right next to all the offices for the mangers, sales guys, etc. So there's a young guy, early 20, comes in, wearing dirty sneakers, khakis, and an untucked button-up shirt. Checks in with the receptionist that he's here for an interview. Manager comes out, greets him, and says, "Your name, right?" Kid confirms. Manager then confirms that he told the kid, when he applied, that he had to dress professional. Not sneakers, tie required, shirt tucked, etc. Kid's like, "Yeah, I remembered, but figured it didn't really matter for just the interview." Manager basically said, "Yeah, If you can't follow basic direct instructions for an interview, this isn't going to work out, and told him to go home. This all happened in the waiting area. Manager didn't even bring him into the office. Kid was like, "Are you serious?" Then had to stand there awkwardly waiting for his ride to come back and pick him up. Story 29. We had an intern one semester. He was handed a large bundle of zip-tied cables and asked to cut them apart and separate them. He literally cut the entire bundle in half rather than cut the zip ties to separate them. Lost $2,000 worth of cables. Fired that day. Story 30. Dude got a job as the overnight shift in my gym. The overnight is here alone. He arrives at 9 and is here till 7 a.m. At about 10:30, another employee comes in to work out and notices the "Please scan here" sign is up. This is used when the overnight goes to the bathroom or has to step away from the front desk for whatever reason. The employee works out for an hour and notices the sign is still up. He walks into the break room, bathroom, etc., and can't find the new guy. Turns out he left an hour into his first shift. Manager had to come cover. He wouldn't have known till the next day if the employee wasn't working out there. Dude ignores all calls from the manager and doesn't even come get his check from his training days. Story 31. Long story short, as a manager for Space Shuttle Atlantis post-Columbia, had a new hire that violated safety rules 3 times in his first morning, then broke another rule after lunch. About tool securing, and dropped a wrench 150 feet onto Atlantis, resulting in $3.3 million in time. Scans, materials to recertify the impacted area for flight. Story 32. I was a night shift manager for McDonald's in high school. New guy, 17 years old, makes an ice cream sundae for a customer with gloopy cold fudge. When the customer complained, he put the whole sundae in the industrial microwave oven we use to melt cheese in like 10 seconds. On like 2 minutes, no less. Enough to start a nuclear reaction. Whole thing melted, plastic container included. He opened the door to steam and slop, took out the melted full containers, put them on a tray and served them to a customer, which is when I became aware. She rightfully asked to speak to a manager. I got the customer set up, apologized, and pulled the kid aside to figure out what happened, while staring at the still steaming tray of sundae slop. All he had to say for himself was, I needed to melt the fudge. Told him to please take his shirt off and go home because I think he's had enough for the day. Before anyone asks, he was trained on the ice cream machine by me personally earlier in the shift. Told the store manager what happened in our manager meeting the next day and said I absolutely don't want him on my shift. The other managers laughed, but echoed the same. Store manager let him go. I called him and told him, apologized, and said it's not going to work out and he can come pick up his check for the hours he worked in 2 weeks. He said, okay, thanks. And I thought that was the end of it. His mom actually came up to the store about an hour later and asked to speak with me since I was the manager that sent him home. I said sure. We grabbed a booth and sat down. She proceeded to tear me a new one for being an incompetent manager. Like a git, I sat there for a few minutes to take it until she took a breath to breathe. I said, look, I understand this is your son's first job. I'm still in HS myself, but anyone who tries to microwave ice cream and then serve it to a client won't be allowed on my shift. She turned bright red and started screaming at me. I got up, politely told her she was causing a scene and to please leave the property. It actually escalated to me having to call the police to get her to leave. She didn't think I had actually called them. Stuck around until they showed up and then tried to split. They stopped her in the parking lot, put the magic handcuffs on her, and eventually let her go. Story 33. I have been a fast food manager a long time, so I have hired and fired a ton of people. Guy within 90 minutes of starting just started eating food off the cook's line. I walked around the corner. He just looks at me and takes a bite out of a chicken strip. I'm not a big yeller, but I straight up ejected that dude like a baseball umpire. That's it, you're out here. Story 34. It wasn't the first day, but the third, nor was I manager. We had an addict get hired as a manager at the Taco Bell I worked at years ago. He came in the third night and spent the first 4 hours nodding off in the office before he decided he should probably do something. He comes out to the line and starts wiping down the food. I'm talking wiping down the cheese with sanitizer. He made it halfway down the line before he registered that we were trying to stop him. Story 35. Not a manager, but watched this one happen. Working for a big-named soda brand as an order puller. Busy times, we would bring in temp help. Temp agency sent guy over. He knew where he was coming. Was told the basic rules, including nothing competitor-related on property. Walks in with a big bottle of competitor's beverage in hand. Warehouse manager literally took one look at him. Asked him if temp agency told him it wasn't allowed, and he said, with an attitude, yeah, but I didn't think it really mattered. For the record, the manager did try to give him a chance to toss, remove it, but said it seemed like dude was just using it to get out of actually having to work. Take the job. Dude went down in warehouse history. Story 36. Not fired, but I quit a job on the first day at Food Lion as a grocery stocker at age 16. In the middle of my first shift, manager comes by and tells me a toilet in the back is clogged and overflowing. Go unclog it and mop up. Okay, I said, and walked to the back and surveyed the scene and looked around for a plunger. I could not find a plunger, so I walked to the housewares aisle and grabbed a plunger off the rack and headed back to the bathroom. The manager said, "What the heck are you doing?" I said I couldn't find a plunger. He told me that's our merchandise and said, "Go put it back." I said, "How should I unclog the toilet?" He said, "Figure it out. Roll up a sleeve." First I laughed and then said, "Are you serious? You want me to use my bare hand to unclog a toilet?" He was serious. I said, "Piss off," and left and went to Pizza Hut to meet friends and never went back. And also never got paid for the hours I worked, which is illegal. Story 37. Hardware store manager here. We hired a full-time sales associate. Wasn't my first choice as he was so full of himself, but we were running really short and he seemed like he would be a decent employee. Well, first day he comes in and is doing fine, working on the floor learning the register, and I noticed he had headphones on. Now we do have a no cell phone policy and it's posted around. I'm easygoing, so as long as it's not around customers and isn't frequent, it is what it is. Second day, he comes on same deal, and I pulled him aside and asked him if he could take the headphones off. He complained, but I said that's that and had him go back to work. Hour later, he's around with headphones on again, and I asked him to take them off. Again. After he got done complaining, we moved on with our days. Day 3, he comes in with music playing audibly from his phone speaker. I gave him 20 minutes, and he was down an aisle working with the music playing. I had to pull him aside and explain how we can't have our phones out. We have customers around. He immediately started arguing with me, brought him down to the store manager, and we fired him. Guy argued his way out of a decent full-time job. Some. Story 38. Customer service desk at an insurance company. Basically just rerouting incoming calls to the relevant claims handler. 18 years old lad comes from a temp agency. Seemed a bit dippy, but should have been able to manage this easy job. After a couple of hours, he'd secured his headset to his head by wrapping sellotape around his head and face several times. Weird, but okay. Checked on him again 15 minutes later, and he'd also sellotaped his telephone handset, each workstation had both, to his head in the same manner. Not only that, but he'd sellotaped his whole head to his monitor and was just sitting there going, "I don't quite know what to do about this," while the call queue stacked up. I know no one can be quite that inept, and it's most likely he was either trying to be funny or he just decided he didn't like the job and wanted out, but I prefer to think he was absolutely damn mental and imagine that he's now a stuntman or a rodeo clown or something. Story 39. I managed a property for a very wealthy couple for a few years. The property was huge and there were workers for the landscaping and then others for all the animals. It wasn't on this guy's first day, but maybe first 2 weeks or so. But I caught him smoking outside the barn where the horses were. Smoking wasn't the issue. It was where he smoked. That was. He was smoking right beside where all the hay and shavings were kept. When I asked him what the hell he was thinking smoking there, his response was, "I thought it was okay because it's not inside the barn." I told him, "It's even worse. At least the barn has a rubber floor and isn't a massive pile of dry hay and shavings that can easily go up in flames with any spark." The hay and shavings area was attached to the barn, and the barn was all wood, so it could have easily been a disaster. I had to let him go. He wasn't the brightest and was often left alone because there was so much work, so he would often be alone, and I felt uneasy with that. That being said, we are actually still friends, and I helped him get his next job. Story 40. In 2008, my husband taught the training class for new salespeople. This new guy was complaining during lunch about this pit bull puppy he just got, how it wasn't mean enough, wouldn't do anything, and that he was going to leave it on the street in Baltimore. The guy was let go and we took the puppy, which was in his car. That puppy became the single greatest dog I have ever known. He passed last year, and I still miss him. Story 41. Not a manager, but saw this happen a couple of weeks ago. The local pizza place is frequent visit for my friends and I. They know our names and usual orders. Nice small town joint. New girl started working there as a cashier. Went up to the counter to get a few pies. We had ordered an hour earlier. We were told 30 minutes. Turns out she had taken the order down over the phone and just didn't tell the cooks. Owner, who is nearby, says, "Sorry about that, pull her right and come back in 20. No big deal." Came back in 20 minutes, and the new girl is doing dishes by hand. The pizzas are under a warmer. With her dirty, soapy hands and no tray, she grabs my pizzas and throws them into a box in front of the owner. Literal suds and dishwater on the food. They fired her that instant. Story 42. Not a manager, but on this woman's first day, she was clearly very stressed and not getting the responsibilities. She went to lunch and never came back. My boss called her and fired her, but it was clear she ghosted without even quitting. At a different job, this guy came to work on his third day in jeans and a hoodie. We were business casual, but not that casual. An hour in, he said he forgot something in his car and never came back. Same deal. Fired for job abandonment. Story 43. I had an employee show up for his first day in ripped jeans and a t-shirt with a naked woman on it, then got ignorant with me when I told him he couldn't work in that and had to go home and change. Story 44. Our company photographed vehicles for dealerships so they could be posted online. We had pretty much one requirement. You had to be able to drive a manual. The company would train a person on everything else. A new hire lied on their application about being able to drive a manual. They thought they could learn on the job. It took the manager training him about 30 seconds to realize how much of liability he was going to be as soon as he tried to move a manual car. We let him go on the spot. I did tell him that if he went and fully learned and came back and proved it to me, he could have his job back. He texted 2 days later letting me know he just couldn't get the hang of it. Story 45. Not a manager, but when I worked at a country club in high school, one of the lifeguards got fired after like a week of working there. There was a kid pretty much drowning in the pool and he didn't see it. One of the parents had to jump in and save him. Story 46. Not a manager, but when I first started working at Walmart, we had a group orientation of about 10 people. There was an older husband and wife duo in my group. The guy kept saying this job was big for him. He'd ask a million questions. Wanted to go over stuff that is self-explanatory, and he'd just wear you out by listening to his senseless dribble. Go on and on about nothing. We had to take some basic customer service training on computers. You watch a short video and answer 4 or 5 questions. You cannot fail these because they literally give you the answers. I hear this 40-year-old man calling his dad during our break. Hey dad, things are going good? I just got 100% on the test. The test being 4 or 5 true or false questions. He then asked his dad when is he able to pick them up. I just felt bad for the guy because he didn't really seem all there in the head. The group trainer sits us down and tells us about how the schedule works. This guy starts freaking out. I can't work Wednesdays, like he wouldn't stop. He started asking random managers who had nothing to do with scheduling, let alone managing the new hires who aren't even officially in the system yet. He would not let up. Any manager he saw, he'd go up to them and talk their ear off about how he can't work Wednesdays. He pissed off the wrong manager because he asked about his schedule 2 or 3 times in the span of 4 hours. The managers pulled him aside, wrote him a check for 4 hours worth of work, then told him to leave. They fired him and his wife quit right after. The sad part is that it seemed like this minimum wage, part-time job at Walmart really mattered a lot to him. I'd hate to imagine how he had to explain what happened to his dad. Story 47. We were hiring for a junior server operator and got an application from a blue suitor that was getting out of the Air Force shortly. He was stationed at the base in town where I had previously done some contract work. Looking over his resume, he had decent skills and training, but claimed that he wrote a piece of software that I had actually written for the Air Force. So we bring him in for an interview, and it's quickly apparent that he's vastly overinflated his resume. We save the best for the end. I ask, so this software you wrote is the password still password? And he give me this look like a dog when he hears a high-pitched noise. How do you know the passwords for that? Because I wrote it. Say hi to Colonel P for me. I'm not getting the job. You are so not hired. I've never seen anyone turn so pale before in my life. Story 48. My partner and I were training a security guard for one of the huge sites that we had. Everyone gets a work phone during the shift to use a live track system and report every so often. After it gets dark, me and my partner lose track of this guy on this. We tried calling him, but he wouldn't answer. After about 3 hours, we found him on the property's playground swings arguing with his girlfriend or ex on the work phone. Apparently, he didn't have a phone of his own, so he took this chance to socialize, and on training day, he couldn't believe that he was getting fired. Story 49. I was the manager of a household in a nonprofit that helped recently released convicts and homeless men get back on their feet and back into society. Many stories I could tell, but this one is of a guy who lasted for the shortest time ever. First day was orientation and basic settling in. During this, he made a mess. He refused to clean up, stole food from 2 people, including me, and fell asleep in the common area, living room. Second day, first official work day, he does all of 2 hours work and immediately complains about his back and not being able to do more. We give everyone ample warning of the level of physical work required of them ahead of time. During this time, it's discovered he sold most of the medications he had and left a huge mess around his bed. He comes back home, leaves without cleaning up to go shopping. He's brought back by a random woman who found him laying on the sidewalk in front of a church just down the street. It turns out he'd sold his meds to buy booze. He was drunk, bleeding, and clinging to a bag of ramen noodles. We called an ambulance for him, and after he left, packed his belongings and called his social worker to pick them up. Not one of the most ridiculous of situations, but the shortest. Story 50. When I was working at this Japanese restaurant, we had to fire one of the new cooks his first day because he showed up drunk. I actually had to go pick him at the bus station because I was the delivery driver. When I pulled up there, I saw him finishing a tall boy of Bud Light. I was thinking, oh man, this might not be good. He got in the car and seemed okay, so I thought maybe it would be all right. When we got to the restaurant, I didn't see much of him because I was out in the front on the register, but man, did I hear a lot, while the owner Carol and the other cooks were training him on what to do. He kept ducking up and knocking things over. The final straw was when he accidentally lit a rag on fire. "That was it!" she screamed. "You're fired! Get out!" She had me drive him back to bus station, and let me tell you, that was an incredibly awkward car ride. Story 51. Once had an employee call in sick on their first day because his dog ate all his gag, so he had to take him to the vet. Like, fair enough, my guy. Get your dog sorted out. You don't work here, though. Maybe lie next time? Or hopefully this is a lie, and next time you'll think of a better one. Story 52. Not a manager, but an employee who saw it all and was slightly involved. I had a front-of-house job a few months ago for a brand new performance arts center, and since it was a brand new establishment, they did training in a boardroom with 30 employees. One dude was just not cooperating. He kept falling asleep, moving around, and he argued about the harassment regulations. The managers said there should not be anything risque posted inside your lockers because it's a unisex locker room and you got to be respectful. He got upset and started a whole tirade about how it's his locker and no one should get a say on what he puts on or in it. He noticed halfway through training that he was probably on thin ice and tried to save his hide. He also noticed that I would fidget constantly, stand up to use the restroom, or do little hand aerobics with my pen, or stare into space for minutes on end. I have and had already told the trainers when I noticed we'd be sitting for 8 hours, so they turned a blind eye to my fidgeting when they confronted him about his behavior. He dragged me into the issue by saying that if he was to be reprimanded, then I should be too for being a distraction to my training. He was fired before his first day of work. Story 53. My uncle lost a job 5 minutes in. He drove up and parked outside, went in to do induction and paperwork. Turns out he parked on a hill and forgot to put the handbrake on in his car. It rolled into the boss' nice, shiny, 5-day-old Rolls Royce. He was asked to leave pretty fast after that. I should mention it was a driving-based job, so showing that he could actually drive and park sensibly was kind of important. Story 54. I manage an IT team. Had a 35-year-old lady come work for my team on contract, basically temp work through an agency. I gave the agency the job description and they were supposed to send me someone who matched. This lady shows up for her first day and talked a good game, but when I show her the workspace and start talking her through how to navigate from one server to another on our system, I find she types like my 70-year-old mother, hunting and pecking so slowly she could probably only do 10 words a minute. She even used caps lock instead of shift for uppercase letters. Literally typed caps lock plus A plus caps lock, etc. Watching that for 5 minutes made up my mind this person had inflated their resume to get the job and really had no idea what they were doing. Quizzing her a little more in depth about her knowledge showed she was in way over her head. I had to tell her it wasn't going to work out because I needed someone to jump in with minimal training and hit the ground running, and that I didn't think she would be able to do that. She immediately started bawling her eyes out, telling me over and over how bad she needed this job until she left. Story 55. The young lad was hired to be the receptionist, however. He didn't answer the phone on multiple occasions. Not only did I have to train him on how to technically use the phone, but more importantly, how to use the phone in terms of how to greet people, how to have a simple conversation without appearing like a git, and how to deliver messages. It may have been his first job, but there was no excuse for that level of incompetence or unwillingness to do any work. After he left, I found out that he had carved rude messages about what he thought of people working at the firm. I only looked under the desk because I noticed he had been making a mess by tearing pieces of paper and then just dropping them on the floor. Every subsequent guy we hired to do this job was also hard work, although nowhere near as bad as this chap. Clearly, they felt it was beneath them. Girls, on the other hand, were fantastic, apart from one who openly admitted she was just trying to get enough money to move to London and be an escort. Her excessive drinking was also training to be able to handle parties. Story 56. Not a manager, but I quit a job during the first 3 hours of being there. Had just gotten out of the military and a new car wash opened up in the town I was in. Went by to put in an application as they had help wanted signs out front. The manager greeted me inside and immediately I just had one of those bad feelings about the guy. Like he was a shyster, but I wanted to work. He didn't ask me anything other than my name and when I could start. I told him I could start that day, so he asked me to return at lunchtime ready to go. I get there and he hands me a shirt. I asked him about filling out paperwork, how to punch in for work, etc. He said I didn't need to worry about that he kept everyone's time in his head. 20-something-year-old me should have known better, but I was stupid. He sets me up with another worker to learn their method of washing cars and whatnot. The guy I'm working with is cool, but tells me that the job is basically bullcrap and that the people who finish off the cars up front, drying, vacuuming, etc. After the washes don't share tips and the rear of the crew would seldom get tipped at all. So I stay for about 3 hours, then take my first break. I called my mom on the break to see how she was doing, lived a few states away, and told her about the job. Once I laid it all out there, she said it sounded shady as duck. Once I hung up, I thought more about it and then was like, yeah, damn this crap. I tossed the shirt on a bench and told the guy I had been working with farewell. then went home. Never heard from the manager, but got a check a few weeks later for about 13 hours of pay. It was around $6 an hour at the time. It's a running joke now that I should have stayed and let the manager keep all my work time in his head because he paid me for 10 extra hours. I never worked. Story 57. Was running a pizza shop years ago and was training a new delivery driver. He entered an address in his phone and it came up as being over an hour away. I told him that was wrong and showed him on a physical map how to find the house. The house was about 20 minutes away in a new development. Quite some time later, well past the time he should have been back, I got an angry call from the customer wondering where his food is. I figured the kid skipped out, so I remade the pizza and delivered it to the customer myself free of charge. An hour after I got back, the customer calls to complain that the kid just tried to deliver a stone-cold pizza. About a half hour later, the kid comes in with the pizza and tells me that the customer didn't want it. I asked him where he's been for the last 3 hours, and he tells me that the GPS took him to the wrong house, the one I told him not to go to, and it took him a while to figure it out. I told him politely to clock out and never come back. Story 58. Not a manager, but a trainer, and witnessed it all. English isn't her first language, but communicating with her was difficult. She applied for a role where she interacts the least with people, which would be an overnight baker. Restaurant is closed, but she is to prep and bake everything for opening at 5 a.m. The first week she was supposed to start her first shift. She called in for the whole week. I don't know the reason. The second week came, but she could not show up for the first shift. She showed up for the day after. Her husband dropped her off. He spoke perfect English, and we had a talk. He kept asking so many questions, such as how many people work overnight, what her main job, role is, etc. He really didn't like the fact that she will be working overnight by herself, even though there's cameras everywhere and the restaurant is closed. He unwillingly drove off after looking around for a bit. Teach her the basics, what needs to be baked and how many. She took some notes and watched for the most part. The next day we had a complaint written about our restaurant online, and the person who wrote it wanted to speak the HR or whoever's higher up than my manager's and general manager's position. Turns out it was the newbie and her husband. They wrote how it was unsafe work conditions for a woman to work alone at night despite the restaurant not being opened and demanded for more people to work during the shift. They also mentioned how it was incredibly difficult duty that was given to her. All she had to do was put pastries in the oven. It's pre-made, cooked frozen. She also demanded a different role that we were not hiring for, nor do we even have that as an option for. She wanted to just clean, like a janitor, etc. Story 59. As an HR, I've had it happen 3 times. 1. Person showed up in pajama pants and a baggy sweater because she said she wanted to be comfortable for orientation. 2. Person made a joke about burning down the brand new building, destroying property. 3. Person punched someone else in the arm, jokingly. Psst, please be on your best behavior on your first day. Pretend like you're a professional and let your wild side out later. Managers want to feel confident that they made the right choice hiring you. And if I don't see that, then I can't send you out to the floor. Story 60. Undisclosed charge for beating up his old manager, giving her a broken nose and fractured eye socket for not approving a holiday request. We were a little late with his background check, but he done really well on the interview and completed training without an issue. First full day on the job, he comes in, and I give him the tour and introduce him to his team, and I instantly get the feeling that he's being shifty. Turns out not 20 minds before his first shift, he got out of his car at a traffic light and screamed at another driver who didn't go through an amber light. Imagine his surprise to see it was our reception desk, security guard. Apparently, he was really aggressive and threatened to slash his tires if he saw that car again. 2 hours later, and about 10 minutes after I found out about that morning, his background checks come back. Story 61. Not the first day, but the first week. Dude would hit the casinos all night and would be half awake during the day. Fell asleep all the time, and we'd frequently find him sleeping in one of the back rooms lying on boxes. Kicked his ass out. Story 62. I'm an operations manager of a construction company in Ontario. Hired a guy with lots of experience, 32 years old, good hardworking guy from what we had gathered. I showed up on site for a meeting with the city project managers and engineers, and I went to use the on-site washroom, porta potty, and when I opened the door, I saw the guy that I just hired phone in hand beating himself. That was his first and last day. Story 63. Not a manager, but a coworker of mine got fired on her first live day on the floor as a server because she didn't notice a table's sushi was never delivered to them. It was sitting in our side station. She dropped the check and the table was pissed. They told her they never got their sushi, and she started describing what it looks like, basically saying you're an idiot to the table. Manager ended up comping their whole bill, which was almost $300. I work at a really posh Asian restaurant in NYC, and she would have kept her job after all this, but turns out she lied to our GM and said the sushi guys never made it. I was still fairly new myself, so I packed the sushi to go and asked my manager what I should do with it. Well, I guess I threw her under the bus unintentionally and brought it to my manager attention that she lied. When I left the restaurant later, she was crying in our employee smoking section. I felt really awful. She had just moved to NYC about 2 weeks prior and really needed the money. Story 64. I wasn't a manager, but a supervisor at the time. Dude's second day on the job, he called in running late from his bartending job. Shows up at the job, grocery store third shift, so amazingly drunk that he could barely stand. He was upstairs in the bathroom shirtless and covered in puke. I called a coworker in to help me convince him to get a ride home. He refused to get a ride. He kept saying how he's got a kid for about 30 minutes. I finally told him if he doesn't get a ride home immediately with my coworker, then I'm calling the cops. My coworker apparently held him back from fighting me in the parking lot. The guy still holds a grudge against me. Oh yeah, not only was he going to drive home, but on a moped. Damn that guy. Story 65. I used to be a lift operator at Stowe Mountain Resort in Vermont years ago. New hire goes to work on top of the sensation quad and proceeds to rub one out while he was watching chairs come in. Patrol looks at him through the window as they do line check and calls in a pleasure situation over the radio. I send up someone else to cover the top, and as we wait for my boss, he goes behind the lift shack and takes a dump in the snow. He packs it into a snowball and throws it at my boss as he skis in to talk to the dude. Bye, Felicia. Story 66. It was day 9 because I had to write them up 3 times first, but they would not stop falling asleep. In the cube, in one-on-one meetings, and in front of a group of customers even. I tried to probe for medical problems that we could work around if needed, and they assured me they were healthy. Okay, then you just won't stop. Gotta go. Story 67. A new bartender made a tiny cheeseburger with pickles as a garnish to a Bloody Mary with both red wine and sherry as ingredients. He decided to argue that it's the correct recipe. Bloke ended up confessing that he is high on codeine the whole time. Crazy person. Story 68. Bar manager here had a new bartender start before the happy hour rush. He served 2 ladies, turned to his supervisor and proudly said, "Maybe if the ladies like their cocktails I give them, they will give me some pussy," while the ladies and the husbands' boyfriends were still easily close enough to hear him. Before we've calmed the guests down, he pisses of 2 waitresses by being generally misogynistic before starting an argument with the female manger. He lasted less than 2 hours. Story 69. Not the manager, but the supervisor who was called in to give a review of the worker. I work weekends at a radio station as a weekend supervisor. Host. The guy wanted to get into radio. We have interns come in from a local job hunting company. They are usually with us a few months to get some experience on their resumes, office work, sales, and other stuff. We had one guy in his early 30s start on a weekend with us as we needed some help with events. He arrived, I had him read the policy binder, and we always have them write a paragraph about what they hope to learn or get out of the experience so we can tailor the tasks given towards that. We headed to the events, and they went well. He seemed happy. Then at the end of the day, he had to write what he did and what he learned about the business. Now it was a weekend, and our office side is closed, so it was a relaxed day for him. He clearly didn't like this as he wrote on his paperwork that we were disorganized and didn't want to help local people. He said he learned nothing and was wasting his time. These papers are electronically submitted to the organization as well as a copy goes to my boss. Let's just say Monday morning his caseworker was there. He was in tears and my boss told the caseworker to take him away and she didn't want to see him again. 1 year later, he left a bad review on our Facebook page saying that we don't want to train locals. Took everything in us not to post his actual paperwork that got him fired as a comment on the review when local people began to attack us. Story 70. Not a manager, but I did floor training at a department store. New employees spent their first week watching videos and doing training exercises. This was her first day on the sales floor. I got an email that they were sending me a new person to train. She isn't in dress code and not wearing a name tag, so at first I didn't realize she was an employee. Until I saw her behind one of the counters, sleeping on the register, and the HR lady talking to her. HR asked her if she'd like to keep her job. The new girl said yes. HR gives her another chance, but has the camera guy watching. As soon as the HR lady leaves, the new girl crawls under a table of jeans and goes back to sleep. I'm guessing this was in a blind spot for the camera because she took a nice long nap. At this point, I have other work, and didn't want to train someone who wasn't going to actually work. I was hoping Sleeping Beauty would wake up and I could show her how to do the new inventory tracking tagging that I was teaching the other employees how to too. No such luck. She did walk up to the counter. I started to introduce myself. Sleeping Beauty took one of the fancy chocolates we sold, opened it, began eating, walking away without speaking to anyone. The HR lady came back and walked her out as she was throwing the wrapper on the floor. Story 71. A woman comes in after moving from out of state. She seemed like a great candidate. We get the standard half-hour break. She was made aware of this before starting. On her first day, she seemed to be under the impression that we get an hour-long break, plus 2 15-minute paid breaks. She lost her crap and became very upset about this. She expressed it rather publicly in front of other coworkers, so I spoke with her privately. She insists that this is state law and that we are breaking the law, that I am a criminal, that she's going to report me to the Department of Labor. No such law exists in Florida, and we had a this isn't going to work out conversation. Story 72. Not the manager or the first day, but I worked with a woman who was fired about 2 weeks in for being constantly late and calling in sick several times. It was a non-profit org supported by members, and the bizarre thing was she showed up several days after her firing at a member event in another state and tried to pass herself off as still being an employee. Freaked out the girl who was legitimately working the event. Story 73. Not first day, but within the first 2 weeks. I interviewed this elderly lady for a front desk position I had open at the time. Data entry, email, real basic stuff. When I asked about computer experience, she told me that she had been working on them since they first became available to the public and held many positions in tech companies, like Verizon. She also told me that she was proficient with Microsoft applications. I offered her a job, excited about this experience she would bring to the table. Fast forward 1 week, and I find out she doesn't even know how to open the internet browser on the computer. She struggled with Microsoft and found it acceptable to do crosswords while dealing with customers. When I spoke with her about these issues, she assured me they would be fixed. In hindsight, I should have walked her out then. After a few days, she had not improved, and I decided it was best to cut her loose. When I told her she was being terminated, she immediately questioned everything. For 15 minutes, I desperately tried to get her to understand why I need her to at least be able to open Excel on her own. Finally, she froze, and a smile began lurching across her face. If you fire me, that means I get unemployment, right? Correct. Thank you for the opportunity. Have a nice day. Always verify information, folks. And don't be as gullible as me. Story 74? It was a guy's first day, got through his computer training, and I put him on the sales floor. He was super friendly and charismatic, so I thought he was a good fit. I walked by him and a customer a few hours later, and he is telling her that as the manager, he could offer her these massive discounts. I walked over and asked what was going on, and he said that I'd promised him a bunch of things in the interview, which I didn't. Hiring 101 never make a promise. So he was going to promise our customers whatever until he got what he wanted. I was so dumbfounded because what he said I had promised him, I remember specifically telling him I couldn't promise. He was still so amped to get working that he didn't mind. And then, day one, he went sideways on me. I told him that we can't lie to our customers and that this wasn't the job for him with that attitude. Had him sign separation paperwork. He asked if he could have his lawyer go over it, and then proceeded to sign it anyways. It was pouring rain, like monsoon status, torrents of rain. And when he got to the door, he asked if I was going to call him a cab. Again, dumbfounded, I just said, yeah, no, good luck out there though. Odd guy. Story 75. Not first day, but certainly first week. Hired a new cashier who seemed cheery, hardworking, and great with customers. Her till was short a total of about 60 pounds sterling from her first couple of shifts combined. This often happened with new staff in training due to keying errors, but it didn't resolve itself, so we kept an eye on her. An assistant manager spotted her, on camera, putting a safe deposit pod full of cash from the till into her handbag instead of into the safe deposit tube. Ridiculous that she thought she'd get away with it, as all the pods were numbered and would have been unaccounted for. I confronted her, did a bag search, found and seized the cash. She tried to claim it must have fallen in. I told her this was clearly bollocks and that she was fired. I then instructed her to pay back the 60 pounds sterlings her till was short, or I'd be reporting the incident to the police. She paid up and left. Another employee then told me that she had another part-time job at an old people's care home, reasoning that if it were one of my elderly relatives in there, I wouldn't want them being left in the care of a thief. I reported the incident to the police anyway, as well as informing the care home manager too. I gather she lost that job too. Story 76. Assistant manager of a Goodwill. People can work off community service time at Goodwill, and the local high school has a policy where if someone was caught with tobacco products, they had to do 5 hours of community service. Not sure if that was for a first strike or the specifics, but I do know I had an assload of teenagers working for me. Best job ever, except for the pay. Half my time was spent assigning work to kids, then chain-smoking cigs out back and checking up on them and the regular employees every so often. Anyway, this kid came in wearing jeans and a bad attitude. Halfway though his shift, which involved sorting through donated clothes, I notice he's switched pants. He now has on a bright red pair of pants. Neon damn red. I know they were donated earlier that day because they caught my attention. Asked if he stole them. He denied it, of course, and claimed he had been wearing them all day, like I wouldn't have noticed his bright red pants. I punched his little time card thing, told him to leave. His mom called later to get me out. He only has 3 days left to get his 10 hours of community service finished. Blah, blah, blah. Offered to just buy the pants. Told her no, obviously. Story 77. Thought this guy was qualified and professional. Good resume, good feedback from HR from the interview process, seemed knowledgeable and friendly. I was honestly excited to welcome him in the team. When we welcomed him, he was nice. He was eager to learn and seemed to fit in with everyone. I noticed he was coughing a lot, but didn't really give it much thought until I asked him if he was all right during our on-on-one training. He flat out confessed to having tuberculosis and was laughing at being able to manipulate HR into hiring him despite incomplete medical screenings. He was proud of it, proud of being sneaky, proud of cheating the system, I don't know. He was gloating. He brought a potentially life-threatening, highly contagious illness into our office and expected me to pat him on the back. I was so shocked. I quickly made a call to my boss and to HR, and we discussed his fraudulent actions. We fired him promptly. Oh, and BTW, one of my team members who sat beside him and guided him through our systems, got sick because of him. What a giant. Story 78. Kitchen manager here. Had a grill cook working his first day. I walk around the corner to see that he had passed out in the broiler grill while assembling it. Woke him up from his nap to tell him he could leave for the day. Turns out, this dude likes substances. Story 79. How about a little switch up? I fired a guy on my first day. I got a job as a shipping and receiving manager for a small warehouse. I had 3 people working for me. I was told in the morning to keep an eye on one of them because they like to drink on the job. Sure enough, this guy ranked of beer after lunch and was drunk off his ass. The branch manager told me I had to fire him, so I did. He did not take it well. It was one of the most awkward moments of my life. Seems kind of messed up the branch manager didn't do it, considering they had worked together for 5+ years, and I only knew the poor guy for a few hours. Story 80. Transfer from another office. Male employee made a derogatory comment to a female employee regarding the hijab she was wearing, and his excuse was, "It's okay because we're the same religion." Story 81. 2 friends same day. One was trying to practically pass her pussy out in the halls at the hotel. The other was offering sex to the customers while she was supposed to be doing housekeeping. At one point, they just sat in the hall on the floor and waited on men to come out. The men were not interested. Story 82. I used to manage a 24-hour mobile bar service that primarily worked Citrance festivals. The deal was free entrance and meals, 8 hours a day on shift, and 16 off to have free time at the party. If it was more than 3 days, we would usually give them a full day off to party. We paid them after each shift, but split tips at the end of the party. So we mainly hired temporary kids that were too broke to buy tickets and wanted to work their way through the festival. It's safe to say that every graveyard shift, some kid would not show up or come in tripping absolute balls and not be able to function. Substances were obviously rampant. All they had to do was pretend to be more sober than the managers, or just have the tolerance to do basic functions. Not that difficult, you would think. It was always the rookies that failed. I had one idiot pull out his ballsack and offer a customer peanuts. Yeah, he got fired on the spot, and we took his wristband away. Apparently, he made it through all 5 days without being busted by security. Story 83. Work in wireless. Hired this guy who had a good resume and sales experience. Leave work. Get a call from corporate saying one of our devices is out of its allowed region. Track it down. This guy borrowed a phone because we didn't let him off early enough to pay his bill. Story 84. We hired in an external supervisor. On orientation day, he was an hour late from lunch. He checked in, said, "Sorry, I'm late," then proceeds to inform me he was going to the restroom. He had a 72-minute poop. We decided he was a poor fit for our corporate culture. Story 85. Manager at a big box retailer. Lockers in the break room. Hired a vet who said he was hard up for work. Shows up on the first day smelling like substances. Meh. Dude smokes substances. Set him down at a computer for training. 15 minutes later and see him leaving the training room. Follow him a bit. He walks out the front door. He pulls the mouse and keyboard out from under his sweater, gets in his car, and proceeds to do substances in the parking lot. I walk in, check his locker, and there is headphones, keyboards, about an 800 gram of substances in it. Called the cops immediately. He walks in about 5 minutes later. I ask him to come to the break room, gave him some candy and a soda. He pockets the candy and drinks soda. I ask him if he's okay. He says yes. Then I tell him the cops are coming. He just says, "Damn," and proceeds to light a cigarette in the break room. I let him smoke it as the cops walked in and cuffed him. Story 86. I was a supervisor on a roofing crew. Young 18-year-old starts as a laborer. The whole trip to the job he's telling us how tough he is and all the fights he's been in. I told him we'd see how tough he was by the end of the day. While I nail-gunned timbers to the roof trusses, his job was to load cement roof tiles onto a cable elevator and press the button to send them up. Repeat, repeat. He was just getting onto the second pallet, and I noticed the elevator wasn't going. When I asked him why he had stopped and why he was leaning on the pallet instead of unloading it, he told me if I didn't shut up, he would come up the ladder and punch me. I said, "Mate, you can hardly stand up on the ground. What do you think you're going to do to me up here?" He stormed away, then 5 minutes later came back and asked me to ring my boss because he couldn't handle the job. We went through a lot of laborers, but he was the record at about 2 hours. Didn't actually fire him, he quit before I got the chance. Story 87. On his first day, My area manager and a visitor from upper management were visiting the store. The kitchen got a little cramped with everyone running around doing stuff and working on different dishes. His main job that day was to watch and see how everything worked before we had him cook with us. He seemed to have gotten the hang of it and decided to jump on the line with us. He was doing good until he turned around with a big pot of stew to run across the kitchen to the plating station. My boss and the visitor were in the way. Not only did he shove them very violently, but also yelled, "You, get out of the way if you isn't going to be doing crap." My boss basically told me either I fire him or he will. Story 88. I manage political canvassers. They have various quotas to reach depending on the campaign. Generally, a canvasser has 3 days to get to goal, and we usually don't fire people on their first day. In my first campaign as this role, I had a canvasser come back from turf with less than 10 precinct to goal. She reeked of substances. I politely explained to her that I didn't think that this was the right job for her, and she, somewhat, agreed. I don't know how high she was when she agreed. Story 89. Not even first day, this was during a working interview. I work at a pet resorts that offers boarding, grooming, doggy daycare, and training. About a year ago, we had someone come in who had applied for a kennel tech position, walking the boarding dogs, dropping food, and cleaning up the kennels and facility as needed. Anyways, this guy, while on his interview, he had brought his nicotine vape with him, which wasn't a problem, until he started walk or potty breaks for the dogs. He would get down on their level before lashing them and blow smoke from his vape into the dogs' faces. I can only assume to get the dogs to lick him or come closer to him. Keep in mind, these dogs are owned by people who are paying Jew-s to take care of them while they're out of town or not able to be home. So safe to say, he didn't even make it through the entire interview, 2 hours, and was sent home early. Story 90. She arrived 2.5 hours late. I had to wake her up because she forgot to set her alarm. She arrived high to work. To top it off, she harassed a coworker by asking her for a naked photo. She was out of a job by the end of the day. Story 91. Work in film, TV as a camera assistant, came back from a hiatus and one of our people were still on a big vacation. So she hired this guy to cover her for a few weeks. The guy misrepresented his qualifications, talked a big game, and name-dropped throughout our camera prep. Day one, he didn't know how anything worked and had zero set etiquette, like a bull in a china shop. He's in the union and was working on a big HBO series, but didn't know basic gear. Made a fool out of himself. Next day, we were filming 2 hours outside of the city at a big oak tree. This kid drove to the wrong place, ended up wandering around the sound stages, 45 minutes away, without calling anyone 30 mins after our call time. Just walked around looking for us, never called or texted, or checked the location in his call sheet, or the location in his email. I finally called him going, "Where are you?" after a protracted, "Oh, am I in the wrong place?" I said, "Don't bother driving out here. We'll find someone else." Story 92. A fresh graduate who reported directly to me said to me in the most condescending tone ever, "It's important to understand stereotypes. For example, Spanish people are very lazy, so they are never going to work as hard, and we have to understand it and treat them that way." Story 93. The guy vanished from the factory floor on his first day without a word. Came back after half an hour eating an ice cream cone. He had heard the ice cream van in the distance and set out to find it. His standard of work and personal hygiene were both appalling, so we were going to fire him the next day anyway. But he didn't turn up. He called in to say he had been signed off work by the doc because of a bad back. This made getting rid of him a bit more complicated. A week or so later, I was filling my car up with petrol and glanced across at the guy at the next pump. It was him, and he was refueling his taxi cab. Story 94. Back in the day, was detailing cars during the summer. Guy, on his lunch break, on his first day, decided to eat his lunch inside a customer's vehicle. A vehicle that we had already finished detailing. And the customer was on their way to come pick it up. He had a fully loaded Italian sub. Had piece of lettuce and tomatoes falling onto the seat, along with oil and vinegar dripping off. Entire vehicle reeked of onions and cold cuts. By the time anyone with any authority got involved, Guy had already opened up a bag of potato chips and was snacking away. Not only got crumbs everywhere, also got greasy handprints all over the steering wheel, radio, center console, etc. He legitimately had no idea what he did wrong. His only justification was that this Mercedes S-Class was comfier to sit in than his beat-up truck. It's been well over a decade since this happened, and my blood still boils every time I think about it. Story 95. I work in a nursing home. I had to take this new girl around with me on my morning routine so she could see how we do things. She was a little lazy and sat down whenever she could. But even though she sat down a lot, she had time to do many things that are complete no-nos. I even told her what not to do, and she was told during her training. 1. She took off a GPS tracker of a man with dementia. 2. She tried on a lady's expensive jewelry. 3. She invited her friend over to have coffee and eat cake during work hours. 4. She peeled off a bandage to check a man's wound. That can be very dangerous, and only nurses are allowed to do that. 5. She yelled at an old lady with dementia because the lady didn't understand what she wanted her to do. She managed to do all this in 3 hours, and then I had to boot her. Story 96. I work in enterprise healthcare at have for the past 15 years. Saw a guy take on an ordinary server deco mem request and half-assed it so badly that he took down our hospital's billing system. I have no idea how the hell this guy got hired in the first place. He put on his resume that he was an Eagle Scout and a young Earth creationist. Hoo boy. Anyway, took about an hour to track down the problem, get things reconnected, back online, and processing. The postmortem document that was prepared afterward said he literally did not look at the labeling on the cables before disconnecting them. It's that sort of lack of attention to detail that will get people killed in my line of work, so he was pink-slipped. No telling how much of a loss the hospital took financially during that hour. Story 97. Third day here. Manager of a Burger King. My first hire as manager shows up ready to work and does well for about 4 hours, then says he has to use the bathroom. I said fine, but make it quick as he had just got back from a break and I had to watch his spot. After 30 minutes, I sent another crew member in there. The employee came out with tears in his eyes, laughing his ass off, saying, "Insert name." Here said he has crap his pants, asking if we had extra shorts. I grab him a pair of sweats left around the store and send employee back in the bathroom. 20 more minutes go by and he comes out in dirty sweats and smelling awful, but ready to work. Had to send him home and then fire him the next day when he came back smelling even worse. Story 98. Had a girl that was such a terrible bartender. She told me she had 5 hours experience. I asked her to make me a bucket of beer, and instead of grabbing bottles to put inside the bucket with ice, started filling up the bucket itself with draft beer. She also didn't know what was in a gin and tonic. Then the worst thing she did was ask all the non-white patrons for cards and tried to make them start tabs. Because she told them she didn't want to risk them running off and stealing from her. Needless to say, I removed from her from behind the bar, told her to kick rocks. Story 99. A guy my partner worked with. I dropped by his school because they were having a barbecue for staff and students. And while my partner was introducing me to everyone, this dude walks in and gives me really unsettling vibes. We got chatting about the Gaeltacht, Irish language regions of Ireland, and within about 2 minutes, dude starts proudly bragging about how he wrote a song about abuse, all in Irish. We're all sitting there awkwardly laughing, but he won't shut up about abuse and other sleazy stuff. He was fired the very next day after students complained that he had told them that it was Teacher Appreciation Day, and they had to bring him gifts, or he'd give them bad marks. He also made abuse jokes in the staff room that morning. He was gone in less than 24 hours of work. Story 100. Worked at a tanning salon when I was 15 years old. Got my best friend a job there by sweet-talking the boss, and he let her fill in for me that night. I gave her the keys, told her how to lock up, and then returned in the morning to find my boss there with a cop. Apparently, she had got the keys stuck in the door, and instead of calling someone, she left them in there knowing I'd be back in the morning and could get them out. The store had been robbed. What was the dumbest thing you've seen someone do on their first day on the job? Story 1. Damn, I worked with a guy who was just awful. I used to work in a meat department and I worked with a lot of weird people, but this guy takes the cake. We'll call him JD. So he didn't get off to a great start. He got hired and then said he had to leave the state for 10 days for whatever reason. My boss basically let this slide and had him come in when he could because we were really short-staffed. So I get into work on his first day and my boss pulls me aside. He said something along the lines of, "This is JD, and he's new. He's a bit different, so bear with him. If you could show him the basics today, that would be great." He had already been there a few hours when I showed up, so I figured he would have the easy stuff out of the way. He was also on the closing shift, which sucked, because there is a lot of cleaning to be done, and new people always slow it down. JD starts off fine. He was lacking confidence and a little slow, but I didn't really think much of it since he was brand new. Red flags start going off when within 5 minutes of meeting me, he starts saying some really sexual stuff. I was working on something and he said, "Damn, if I saw a pussy like that, I wouldn't be able to hold back, just weird crap like that." Later in the day, it was time to start cleaning. I tell him to move to help clean off the table so we could wash stuff down, and he mouths off to me. He goes on about how it's not his fault that it's dirty, so it's not his responsibility to clean it off. He keeps getting in the way, so I have him go wash dishes. I show him the basics and tell him to call me over if he has any questions. After about 30 minutes, I go over and check on his progress. It was a disaster. Instead of washing and stacking the dishes in an organized manner, he just has a mess of dishes stacked all haphazardly. He also didn't do a very good job of cleaning the dishes. I take over and tell him to find something else to do. After a bit, I look over to see him very clearly staring at a girl's ass. Now I'd be lying if I said I never checked any of the girls out, but he was standing in front of the counter just staring and people were noticing. I suggested maybe he do it more subtly, and he freaks out saying it's his right and blah blah blah. More red flags go off as we get to talking. He's 31 but acts like he is 20. He talked about all the jobs he has had and was bragging about how he has never worked a job for more than 1 year. He then claims he used to work for this grocery store chain back during high school. When helping customers, we were supposed to close with a little saying like, "Have a nice day," or "Thanks for shopping with us," simple stuff. He starts saying things like, "Vote for Obama," or "Don't shop with us, this store sucks." I tell him to keep it simple and unpolitical. He again gets angry with me and claims he can do what he wants. We got on the topic of wages, and he found out I was making a lot more than him. I had managed to negotiate a higher starting wage and some big pay increases. He was upset that he had started at the advertised starting wage, which was much higher than minimum wage. We sold meat by the pound, but also by the item. He would tell customers the wrong prices. Didn't understand when the scale read 2 pounds that it meant 1 pound 8 ounces, not 1 pound 52 ounces. Regularly sold things at the wrong price, filled the case incorrectly, and just lots of little things. This job was not hard if you had an ounce of brain power. It was his first day, so I didn't expect him to be perfect. But after a few hours on the job, he became overconfident and was doing things wrong, but acting like it was the right way to do it. The final straw for me was when he pulled out over $250 worth of steaks and started cutting them up because they look better this way. I caught him before he could ruin them all, but I had to toss a lot of steaks in the trash. This happened during a weekday when we are slow. His next 2 shifts were on the really busy weekends. He made it 3 shifts before he was fired. The final straw for the boss was when the boss asked him to do dishes and he said, "No, I don't feel like it. You can't tell me what to do." And the boss just said, "Get out," and just held up his hand like talk to the hand anytime he tried to argue. He came back like a week later demanding an exit interview, but no one gave it to him. He came back to the meat department a few more times and would place a huge order, and then once it was packaged up, he'd say, "Never mind, I don't want it anymore," and we'd have to put all the stuff back. He got banned from the store and escorted out by security after he did that a couple times. He claimed he was moving to Palm Beach or something to manage a hotel, so I hope JD is doing well after all this time. Story 2. I was training a guy on the phones and he said he was up for taking a call. Anything he didn't know, he'd transfer them to me. Cool. Good man. I was listening in and typing notes when they went off track. He got flustered and was reading the damn notes I was typing directly to the customer. It went like, "Customer. So what time should I expect it to arrive, John? Ask them when they place the order. Customer. Pardon? John. No, ask them when did you place the order? You. Was it today? Customer. Me. I placed the order yesterday? It's for me. John. Yesterday was a weekend, sir. Tell them that it will be with you within 3 days. Customer. Pardon. John. No. Tell them that our standard delivery time is 3 days, but tell them. Customer. Tell who? John. I'm going to put them on hold for a minute. No, you. On hold. Now. Story 3. Not wear any shoes or socks. Seriously, bare feet, to an office job. It's been a month now, and Har has had to talk to her 4 times already, and every time she'll wear shoes for maybe a week, then go back to bare feet to work. It's one of the strangest things I've ever seen. And she is probably going to be fired soon from an easy, high-paying office job because she just won't wear shoes to work. This is not a small office with a few people. This is a fairly large company. Our office is large enough that some employees have a razor scooter they use when they need to go to the other side of the office. Our dress code is very relaxed. She could wear open-toe shoes or even beach flip-flops without socks. She just has to wear something. It's strange that she's a new employee that has been spoken to by HR multiple times already within the first month, yet still refuses to wear shoes regularly. I don't make the rules. I'm not HR. I don't personally have any problems with it, other than it being odd. I don't have any problem with people walking around in bare feet. No, I don't wear shoes around my house. The op asked, "What is the dumbest thing someone did on the first day of work?" And I responded, "Not wearing shoes to your first day of work at an office job is dumb. Continuing to defy HR and management multiple times within your first month of work over something. As silly as not wearing some sort of footwear is dumb. She will probably get fired over it, not because management has some barefoot vendetta, but because she is defying HR and management over something so simple. She goes barefoot everywhere. The bathroom, break room, meetings. It's not just at her desk. It's everywhere." Story 4. She got locked in the walk-in fridge. The one that doesn't have a locking mechanism and requires a simple push from the inside to open. Nobody noticed she was missing for 10 minutes. One of the servers heard a banging coming from inside and opened it to investigate. She tumbled out, thanking him, while he looked confused and then started laughing. Story 5. It wasn't his first day, but his second or third, maybe. I worked at a fast food place where we sold burgers that we garnished to people's liking at the counter. I worked at the drive-thru, but the front counter where this new guy was working was maybe 5 feet behind me. I looked over at one point in the middle of the dinner rush, heard the customer say, "I didn't want mustard or ketchup on that," and I watched him as he took the top bun he'd just put the condiments on and wiped them off the bun on the edge of the counter. Then he put the bun back in place, as if the customer would be okay with that. Nope, no way. Customer just didn't have any words. Neither did I, really. I don't remember if the manager saw this and came over, or if I went and got them myself. It was chaos, so my memory's fuzzy on that. But my manager's response was very prompt. He walked the new guy to the back and told him to go home, asked the guy on grill to make a fresh burger, and came back to apologize to the customers and garnish their burger himself. New guy did not return that night or for another shift. Story 6. And I saw a girl show up for her first day at Pizza Hut, wearing a khaki skirt and flip-flops. She said that the uniform wasn't cute, so she wore this. She went to the dishwasher area, slipped, because her flip-flops weren't slip-resistant as required, fell on her bottom and ripped the edge of her skirt to show her panty line. She went home and never came back. Story 7. Story of this girl's first day and leading to her last day. Hired a new receptionist for the construction company I work for. Her first day, I took her shopping at Office Depot to get a few things she needed for her desk and also took her out to lunch, because I wanted her to feel more welcome into the company since she seemed nervous. The CEO said it was fine. Cool. So we get there. We order our food, and suddenly she proceeds to boast to me about how her live-in boyfriend is a dealer and he can get me any sort of substances I want. And hey, she's got some issues with her storage facility because someone's been going into her unit and stealing her things. So can she have Friday off to deal with it? Surely it's a misunderstanding because only her and her boyfriend have keys, and it can't possibly be addict boyfriend. Spoiler, it was addict boyfriend. And oh hey, her kids need her to watch them next Monday, so can she either take the day off or bring them to the office? I brought her back to the office in a bit of a shocked autopilot mode. I mentioned it all to my boss, and he was just as taken aback. She ended up not taking Friday off and not having her kids come in on Monday, nor skip work, so maybe we were fretting for no reason. Nope. 2 weeks later, she's fallen asleep at her desk 15 times, called off 2 days, had drama with her landlord and her boyfriend, and he and his gang were threatening to come to her place of work and dam it up. And the kicker was when she actually did bring her kids to work, because she saw a female coworker bring her kids to work, after asking the boss. Receptionist didn't ask the boss. She just brought them. I'm not very kid-friendly, let alone at my workplace, let alone horribly behaving kids that aren't being disciplined. Receptionist then went out to the warehouse for a cigarette and to talk on the phone for 30 minutes straight, leaving her kids to run amok in the office. I had an anxiety attack when one of them stubbed their toe on my desk and began screaming shrilly. My ears were ringing. I stormed to the adjoining suite where my CEO was stationed and announced, "If that idiot was there the following Monday, I'm going to walk out until she's no longer there," explained myself, and he was understandably pissed off. Thanked me, told me I could go home early. He'd deal with it for the rest of the day. When I was leaving, he was calling into her office to ask her to come over, but lo and behold, no answer. Ha, she was not there Monday. Story 8. I was 17 years old, working as a hostess in a restaurant. I was training a new host that day, and it was very busy. We didn't have buzzers, so we had to yell out names when the table was ready. I told the new girl to call the next person on the list and take them to their table. The name of the guest was Beatrice. New girl grabs 2 menus and yells, "Beet rice, party of 2. Story 9. I sent out 10,000 emails through the automated system my first day. To make it worse, the emails I sent were telling our policyholders their insurance had expired. Still working here 3 years later, though. Story 10. Yes, I am that a hole. Okay, so here's my story. Yesterday, we had a new guy join the company as a sales dude. Swear, he might as well have been George Costanza. Deadass, looked just like Jason Alexander. But here's the thing. He may have been insane, so apparently he had a ridiculous head cold, and he spent the entire day blowing his nose. About every 10 minutes, you heard this comedic honking as he blew it. He then would get up twice an hour and go to the bathroom and also honk his nose in there as well. Literally, I counted. He went to the bathroom 10 times yesterday. So all of our sales reps get leads to cold call every day. Ever since I started doing leads, I've got nothing but praise for them. Apparently, they get lots of calls and it's going well. This guy? He said no one was answering the phone and a lot of the numbers were bad. So I sent him 200 new leads, but he decided to just skip it and left work early, just at the same time I was going to smoke. So I lit up a cig and all of a sudden he walks outside and turns to his left. Then he turns to the right. Finally, he just stares at me and squints his eyes really tightly as he stares at me and grimaces. I was like, ooh, and then he turned around and walked away. I was like a light. Skip to today. Mr. Magoo spends the entire day with his face on his computer. He is wearing glasses and somehow he cannot see a damn thing. His nose is touching the screen. I'm like, aight, whatever. I'm just so fascinated by this lunatic. So the sales supervisor decides today he's going to give a pep talk, but mostly he's just pissed off. I don't know what happened. But he is ranting and raving about being on time, taking your breaks appropriately, etc. No biggie. These things should be followed. But then, all of a sudden, George Costanza picks up his cell phone while sales supervisor is raving. The supervisor looks at him and just goes, "Costanza, get out. You're done here." fired him on the spot in front of everyone, and George Costanza refused to leave. He stood there asking for his money for working until they threatened to call the cops. Story 11. I worked for a sandwich shop, and they sent me to a store across town to start training for management as a shift lead. They had also hired someone at another store as a general manager. They decided to let us have a slow shift together. Our trainers went to another restaurant in the square to have a meeting. This is normal. About 10 minutes after the training staff left, the guy training to be a general manager decided to go get a haircut. He left me, a training manager with no register access keys, with a crew of 3 teenagers. Fortunately, I have managed a restaurant prior to that. So I was able to handle the short-staffed shift and also find a workaround for the register issue. When the trainers came back from their meeting and saw that the general manager had left, they were shocked. And when he came back with a freshly chopped coif, he was freshly chopped from his job as well. Story 12. I worked front of house at a small bakery. I was working a super busy shift with a brand new kid. I had him running the register while I boxed orders. He was pretty slow, but I just decided that was his personality. No big deal. A customer ordered some cakes, which I began to box up while he searched for the items on the register. He suddenly blanched and began to blink slowly, asking the customer to repeat the order. Then I saw him sway, and I realized he looked like he was fainting. I ran over to him as his knees began to buckle and caught him. All of the customers in line began to panic. The kid was muscular and about 6 feet 3 inches. He probably weighed 200 pounds. I'm a pretty small person, and somehow managed not to drop him on the concrete floor while getting him down to the ground. I got him situated safely and conscious. I gave him some water and sent him to the hospital when he told me that he had been drinking the night before, taken a fair amount of anti-anxiety meds, and was on cold medicine. Poor kid. He ended up to be not very good at the job overall and was let go a few weeks later. Story 13. I worked for a fashion PR company as an intern a while back to help an old friend gear up for London Fashion Week. Anyway, the big boss decreed that although we wouldn't be paid in cash, we could claim all expenses, and in addition, she would sneakily give us some gift items. Basically, designers who want to promote their products will send their PR firm a ton of clothes, usually shoes for my firm, so we can gift them on to celebrities. Celebrities get free crap, we get paid, designer get publicity, everyone wins. Except one dumb-as-crap intern gets some gift shoes, impossible to get on the high street and worth hundreds of pounds, and promptly posts a picture of them on Instagram saying, "So grateful to PR firm for giving me these amazing shoes from designer." She idiotically tags both the firm and the designer, who promptly calls the boss of the firm and proceeds to scream and threaten to pull her multi-million contract with the firm, demanding to know why the firm is giving away her incredibly expensive shoes to unimportant interns. No more gift items for any interns. And the intern in question was gone roughly 2 hours after getting in on her first day. Story 14. I trained this girl that was from Kentucky. This was a crap fast food job. Nothing really difficult. Granted, she lasted a week, but every day she came into work, she would claim it's her first day. Now, she may have gotten away with it for a few days as we had a lot of employees. The problem for her is I was training her multiple days in a row. Every single day I trained her, she told me it was her first day. The girl was in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, and had no working experience, which we all thought was odd. On her first day, I don't remember which, I was training her on the drive-through cash register. I was pretty quick with it because I had a bit of experience with it. Now, these cash registers couldn't be easier. It had a nice big screen and large simple buttons. It also dispensed the coins for you, so you only have to count the bills. I remember that I didn't want to confuse her too much, so I just had her taking cash and giving change. I've never seen someone more confused with money. She gave incorrect change to people several times. A couple times, she didn't even charge the person when they used a card, which created more confusion. She ended up being put on fries after several painful hours of me training her. That was even worse, surprisingly. I think she may have lasted another week or so before she just didn't show up. I saw her about a week later working next door at another fast food place. I walked in and she was at the counter. She didn't recognize me, I guess. Well, I ordered something and she took far too long for her to take my order. And at some point she says, "Sorry, it's my first day." Story 15. My mom is a PI and runs her own department in a cancer research institute that is affiliated with the university. Every summer, she takes on a handful of summer students from the university. Generally, they are very smart, high-achieving students who should be fairly familiar with working in a lab. Last summer, she was giving an initiation tour to her new summer students, taking them around the different facilities and explaining what they do in the different areas of each lab. She took the students into the dark room, which is shared by the entire department, so like 5 labs, where they were processing a ton of results from different experiments. She was in the midst of explaining the purpose of the dark room when one of her students switched from safe light to on. If you're unfamiliar with a dark room, you should never ever turn the lights on when images are being processed. You immediately destroy all the film that isn't protected. That student basically destroyed about $40,000 worth of results in 1 second flat. He said that he couldn't see with the red lights on. My mom couldn't justify the cost of him as a summer student, paying his salary, plus paying for his equipment use and supplies for experiments, after the cost of the work he had destroyed. She had to let him go because he basically blew more than what he was worth in about 1 hour of working there. It's tough because having something like that on your CV would basically destroy your future prospects for a career as a PI. Because scientific research is a really competitive industry. STEM isn't as great as Reddit would have you believe. But how could she have trusted him to work in her department after that? Story 16. I was a landlord for a time. One of my new hires was approached by some rando who asked to be let into someone's apartment, and they were about to grab keys and bring them over without even idling them or asking what their relation to the resident was. Almost gutted them. Story 17. Come to work on substances. Granted, this was a restaurant and a good number of people who work there are under the influence of something. But he was so high from the night before, July 4th, that he freaked out and stayed in the basement for an hour. The owner found him, and luckily for the guy, he just sent him home to come back another day. Story 18. We worked at an office call center. New girl's first day. She is an hour late for work. She shows up and explains that she was late because she slipped and fell in the lobby of our building on the way in, and it took her an hour to get upstairs to us because of extreme back pain from the fall. She asks to leave to immediately go to the doctor. The boss, of course, agrees. Day 2, she shows up late in a neck brace. Apparently, she had extreme neck pain in addition to her back pain and was constantly talking about all of the substances she got prescribed. She was in training all day and kept interrupting the boss mid-sentence of training to talk about how obsessed she was with reality TV shows. The interrupting to talk about reality TV shows went on for several days, much to the amusement of all of the rest of us, when one day the boss received a phone call. The boss hung up the phone and fired the new girl right there in front of all of us. Apparently, new girl's husband was divorcing her that day, and he called us to let us know that the new girl never fell. She was never injured. She was committing insurance fraud and was planning to sue our company. Story 19. I was working an IT help desk job and was responsible for configuring and setting up laptops, computer monitors, etc. at the desks for new hires. Depending on the job that employees are hired for, they receive different equipment. One day, we had 2 new employees starting on the same day, so I set up their desks. One of the new hires was being hired for advertisement, design work, so they received an iMac, which contained Photoshop and some other needed software. The other was a business-oriented employee, so they received a Windows laptop with Microsoft Office and some other related software. Not even an hour into their first work day, and I receive a call from the manager of the new hire doing design work, asking me why they didn't receive an iMac. I assumed I either set up the new hires at the wrong spots, or they were sitting in the wrong seats. Name tags on desks so unlikely. So I go over to take a look, and it turns out the employee on the Windows laptop sat in the right seat, but liked the iMac across from her more than the Windows laptop she was given. So she took it upon herself to move all her materials over to the other new hire's desk and brought the iMac over to hers. Why she didn't just switch the name tags is beyond me. Story 20. 911 dispatcher. I was about as new as you could get. My supervisor was also my trainer, and he fought tooth and nail to try and get out of it. He didn't want to train any more people, as it's like an extra $6 a day and more than double his normal responsibility. My trainer felt the best way to teach you was to shame you so badly you never made that same mistake again, as it was burned into your very soul. My first 911 call, and it was chaos. I froze, had no idea what to do. I panicked and looked to him. I said, "What do I do?" He says in a serious manner, "Hang up," and I hung up. He then explodes, "What in the actual did you do? You never hang up on someone on 911, you idiot." I immediately followed instructions without thinking. First and last time. Story 21. I was a security lead at a moderate-sized company at the time. We had a new employee that appeared to be having a panic, anxiety attack right in the shift meeting before everyone went to their assignments. He asked to leave to go to the bathroom, and we let him. It was common for new employees to excuse themselves like this and vanish without a trace. So in this case, I followed him without him knowing. Come to find out, he went into the bathroom and called his psychic in a panic because he saw something about the stars in the sky that told him something bad would happen that night. So his psychic gave him a reading over the phone that it would be okay and not to worry. He didn't know I heard, and once his reading was done, he ran back to the shift meeting. He had several other issues like this, and we had to let him go after a couple of weeks. Story 22. Worked at a car dealership for a summer as a salesman. We had some dude come in that was supposed to help the salesman do whatever. Gassing up cars, pulling into prep, delivery of vehicle. Basically, if it was an annoyance to the salespeople, this guy got the luxury of doing it. Well, it was his first day, and one of the salespeople asked him to put a plate on a car for a test drive, but they would be driving alone because he knew them, so just pull the car up front and let them take it away. I asked him if he wanted me to show him how to put the dealer plate on the car. It's not just the plate, but in like a bag with straps, so you can just put it in the trunk latch and have it hang out the back. If it isn't visible, there can be fines and whatnot. He looks at me and tells me, "Hey, only an idiot wouldn't know how to put this thing in the back of a car." I kind of laughed too, but let him go. He comes back after 20 minutes and tells me, "Hey, so I can't find the dealer plate." Turns out he lost it because he put it on wrong. And if you feel sorry for him, the car they drove was a Wrangler. The back of the Wrangler where the plate goes juts out the back. That little piece of plastic jutting out the back? Yep. He wrapped the straps around that twice instead of shutting it in the gate, and thus he lost it. And the fine for losing a plate at the place I worked was $1,000. So that is the story of the guy who started to work and actually lost money on his first day. Story 23. I've never been this excited to answer one of these. I worked at an auto shop with a massive A-hole mechanic. A hole mechanic got a brand new expensive Mako toolbox, and if you even splashed water on it, he was screaming at you. 2 days after he got this toolbox, we got a new guy that's never done an oil change in his life. He liked to play it off like he knew everything, and he went to empty our oil drain, a mobile tank with a hose and valves. He set the hose up to empty and hooked the air hose up to it and left. 5 minutes later, we heard a pop noise. New guy forgot to open the valve to the hose, turning this oil drain into a geyser on wheels, and oil was flying in every direction. And nobody ran into the oil rain to attempt to stop it. This geyser rained all over a Hole's brand new toolbox, and I swear this grown man was in tears, screaming, and new guys just yelling, "Crap, crap, crap, 1 second." And he ran to his car, and we thought he was getting something to help the cause. But he did a burnout out the parking lot, and nobody's heard from him since. Story 24. Not come in. A girl's first day. She is in college. We start at 10. She is supposed to come in at 1. 1 comes. No girl. Half hour later. Still no girl. I ask one of my bosses about it. Haven't heard from her. Eventually at around 3, she calls. Apparently she is sick and can't come in. It's a long story, but out of 5 shifts given to her, she only shows for 2. Then yesterday, she messaged our boss saying she can't work this weekend because her family is closing their cottage. Boss wants to fire her, but part of why we hired her was to keep the store open while they go to Mexico to be in a wedding party a few weeks from now. We say we will give her one more chance, so today, Friday, she's supposed to come in at 2, she texts me. I am not one of her bosses, I am a regular worker. That her mom has shingles and she needs to go get checked for it. The boss is already pissed at her. She asking me all, "What do I do?" I'll tell you what I did, told my boss what was up. This girl never actually came in to talk to the bosses or even call them. She texted them everything and was texting me about this stuff behind their back. She hasn't even been working with us a full 2 weeks. So, she is now let go as of today, and now we got to find a newbie in time for my boss's vacay. What a waste of time. Story 25. I helped a struggling friend get an easy job at the same place I worked. He made it through his first day, then called me to ask when he should come in next. I told him to call the boss and find out. He didn't show up the next day, and the boss asked me where my friend was. I called him, and he said, "I actually didn't call the boss yesterday. I figured I'd wait till he reaches out to let me know my schedule. This is why he is still struggling."